Another CEO Wisdom Pod. We have Pepz Javier with us today. Pepz is coaching aspiring and struggling entrepreneurs into building profitable and low cost businesses. He retired from human resources at 30,
Yep.
Latino and Dominican origins, I believe. And yeah, his company is called the Pep Talk with Peps. It's a multiple six-figure coaching business. And yeah, before that, Pep was a recruiter, a career coach, and so forth. So, Pep, welcome to the pod, or Peps, should I say?
Yes.
Tell us a bit more about yourself and what you're up to nowadays.
Well, firstly, thank you so much for having me. Honestly, it's been a really interesting journey. I started off in human resources, as you mentioned, and I did that between the ages of 18 up until I was like 30, a little bit over 30. And during that entire time, I was doing coaching and I was also doing entertainment. So outside of coaching, I'm also an entertainer. But what I really focus on now, specifically within the coaching space, is helping people, specifically Latinos, to create profitable businesses with little overhead, so they can actually like live a life that's exciting for them. You know, one of the things that I've learned is most people don't want to have a job. They don't want to have a job. They want to have more time. They want to have more freedom. They want to enjoy the actual world. But with jobs, we're working like 40, 50, 60-hour weeks. You know, we're trading our time for money. We're looking at our lives. And many people are wondering why they aren't happy. Like, why can't they live a life of freedom? And a lot of that has to do with money. And one of the things that I have to work on is, especially being Latino, is working through being broke, working through coming from scarcity, you know, being a child of immigrants, being Dominican. Scarcity gets passed down. So right now my focus is really helping Latino, well, specifically Latinos, but any aspiring and struggling entrepreneurs to actually learn how to make more money via what they love to do without working full time.
Right. And should they get a job? Should they start their own business, or is starting your own business sort of hitting hardcore mode from the get go and maybe too much for most?
I think it kind of depends on the client, but I tend to typically work with clients who are looking to leave corporate. So some people, when they want to start a business, they usually want to start it because they're tired of what they're already doing. So most of my clients are usually like working professionals. They've been in their careers for 10 years or more. So they already have the familiarity of what it's like to work at a job. So most of my clients typically are looking to transition from being an employee to being an entrepreneur, which is a little bit different than somebody who's never had a job and they're looking to launch a business. Usually those people, in my experience, have a little bit of an easier time in making a business from scratch because they don't have, you know, the habits of getting paid every 2 weeks. They don't have the habits of working for somebody else, and they don't have the same mental limitations that an employee would need to work through to become an entrepreneur. So for me, most of my clients, and I love working with these people, are people who are in their jobs, in their careers, and they're looking to leave. And the good thing with that is a lot of the skills that anybody would have in a job, you can monetize as an entrepreneur and make more money. So a lot of the same HR skills that I would use for my career as an employee, I've been able to utilize for contracts where I'm getting paid 4 and 5 figures just for a gig, not for me to work for them full time.
Right. And you mentioned when we started that most people don't want to work. I think you called yourself a multi hyphenate or something like that. You're into so many things. You're like a dancer, an actor as well. You've worked with Megan Thee Stallion and a bunch of other prominent artists. Diplo, I believe you said.
Yep.
How do you juggle all of that? And is that an advantage for you? Like, yes, you're having fun, but can you also make good money while being spread out throughout many fields?
Great questions. To be honest, a lot of it has to do with time management. So the way that I teach time management, that was actually the first thing that I was ever hired to teach, was how to like schedule your days. Is really figuring out like what's the priority, you know, both on a macro and micro level. So on a macro level, long term, it's going to be coaching and acting. So it's already getting streamlined. But at the beginning of my careers, it was career coaching, it was mindset, and it was dancing, it was acting, it was all of the things. So one of the things that I constantly have to make sure that I'm reminding myself of is, well, what are we working towards? So even now, like there's dance jobs that I just don't even consider doing because it's not in alignment with the actual goal that I'm working towards. So for example, if I were to be offered a tour to go on tour for an artist, I probably wouldn't do it. It would have to be an artist that I've been wanting to dance for my entire life, just because it's not in alignment with the life that I'm looking to build. So the first thing is like really figuring out like what is a priority long term, and then day to day, like what needs to happen for me to actually have a winning day and then a winning month. So that's number one. And then number two, entertainment, to be completely honest, financially it's a little crazy. So typically the way entertainment works is you usually don't get paid top dollar unless you're like an A-list actor or celebrity, and that takes usually years to get to, right? And then even within that, the majority of the money that we make, it gets divided up. So a big portion of it goes to our agents, to managers, then another portion of it you have to take out for taxes, about like 30%. So by the time that you get your check for yourself, you're looking at 50% less than what you made originally. So with entertainment, I do it just because it's been a dream since I was little. And now that I make good money from coaching, I don't necessarily worry too much about the money from entertainment. I do consider it, you know, I'm not going to take any job for whatever the price, but it's not as big of a influential factor for me as it is for a lot of other artists. And then I think one of the things that I realize that I'm looking to do is also not really caring about what it's looked like before. So before it was either you were an artist or you were a coach or you were a business owner, or something, like you were always doing one thing. And in my mind, I realized I don't need to pick and choose, you know, especially now with business, like there's a lot of different ways that you can scale a business without working full time. So like leveraging social media, creating courses, creating productized versions of your offers, getting contracts. I think that does that answer the question? I feel like that was a little bit of a tangent.
Yeah, and I'm curious also, you mentioned making good money with coaching, came from a scarcity mindset. How long did that take you, and how did that happen? Is it streamlined GTM systems? Is that a high retention of clients? Is it increasing your prices and going high ticket? Is it choosing a specific ICP? How did you get there?
Yeah. Well, it's a few different things. One, I always believe that everything comes from the mind. So everything that we do, that we believe, that we receive, it's always related to the mindset. So with the work that I do with my clients, which is why I believe I have a high retention rate, is we're always working on our mindset, and working on our mindset, funneling into a strategy. So a lot of entrepreneurs, and I was guilty of this, is we'll start our businesses charging really low, like tremendously low. And I remember I was doing like sessions for like $100 an hour, and I had like 70 coaching calls per month, and I was just feeling like I had a job. And then when I was looking at the results that my clients were getting, like people were closing, you know, deals that were worth $30,000 in 2 weeks. People were getting jobs in 6 to 9 weeks, you know, with a raise of $48,000, sometimes 50K. I remember somebody I coached for 4 weeks. She landed a job paying her $80,000 more than what she was making before. So when I was realizing that my clients were getting results worth multiple 5 figures, then I realized, oh, my coaching is worth that amount, right? So retroactively, what I've learned is that we'll never really charge what we're actually worth if we're actually growing. So there's always going to be a little bit of a disconnect as to like how much we can actually charge. But when I was seeing that on average, my clients were getting results worth multiple 5 figures, then I decided to switch it to high ticket. And now when I coach people for businesses, I always inform them that most people undercharge what they're actually worth. And for me, the most effective way of making money sooner than later in business is going high ticket, but you also want to create a great high ticket offer. Like you don't want to just charge $10,000 for whatever, and it's not worth $10,000. So I'm a big proponent that whatever you're charging, the value that somebody's getting from it needs to be worth way more than what they're paying for it. Even if that's low ticket, high ticket, or if it's a freebie, people need to feel that they're getting a steal with what they paid for it. And that's my mentality. It's we want to make sure that we're charging healthily, because the only way you're going to make money is if you're charging healthily.
Also, it filters out a lot of bad apples, I would say. Like low budget people, most of the time, they're just like pain in the ass, And you
Yeah.
could see it from the get go with these types of clients. Like from the first sales calls, like if you see that they're negotiating, putting you against the walls, it's likely that they're gonna be like that throughout the full project. And not to talk about the energy loss, right, of dealing with
Yeah.
these mindsets. Talking about that, you again coming back to the mindset part. Yesterday I spoke with my parents, and although my dad's an entrepreneur and all of that, that it's always like limiting conversations, right?
Mm.
Like, oh, you're buying this fancy house now, you should be careful. Oh, you have this fancy bike that you just buy, be careful with that bike, be careful. It's always like limiting rather than sort of empowering you to achieve more, right? Like you
Yeah.
probably have some of that with some of your close ones. Like how do you deal with that? Like other mindsets that are just not in sync with you. Like just do you just not talk about these victories of yours with them, or how do you deal with that?
That's a good question. The first thing that's coming to my mind is that we all have limiting beliefs, no matter how successful we are. Like we all have certain things to work through. So the person that comes to mind that I have probably the smallest conversations with about this would be my dad. Um, but with my dad, I always think about, if I still have my limiting beliefs that I have to work through, then I should give him a little bit of compassion to just be who he is, right? And then while nobody's perfect, it's also finding the people that we can grow with, and finding the people that we can have conversations about certain things. I don't believe that there's one person for anybody that we can have a conversation about anything, because we all have our own things to work through, whether it is money, health, business, love. There's always somebody with something that they have to work through in one of those areas. So it's always like finding the right people that we can talk to about what a specific topic could be. And then also being mindful that nobody really has all the answers, So before I would get frustrated, I would be like, oh my God. Like, I'll be like, wow, why can't we just talk about this and like move forward? I remember I was listening to Jim Rohn in my car, and he was with me, and he was like, oh, you listen to this positivity bullshit? And I was like, oh my God. And then I was like, well, that's just who he is. That's who he is. He's not the person that listens to personal development, and I can't be mad at him. What he knew is what got him this far and allowed him to parent us the way that he did. He was a great provider. And I just have to understand that I can't force somebody to change, no matter how much I would like to.
Yeah, we all have different personal experiences. Maybe he did listen to these motivational speaker and didn't see any impact in his own life, and because of that, everyone doesn't have results with that. I think like older mindsets. Yeah, it was different times back then.
Yeah.
Like different hustle, limited technology, right? And if he came in as an immigrant, it's a hard fucking life, to try to make it there. Do you still have like that chip on your shoulder that forces you to always do more? Do you still have some of that scarcity in you, like I'll never have enough? Or tell me about like what goes on in your mind when it comes to
Yeah.
wealth.
Honestly, the short answer is yes. It's funny because I recently got into awareness, I think it was last week, where I've had like 5 different like deals that I'm looking to close, and they're taking forever. And and when I was getting frustrated, where I was like, I want it now. I'm like, I want it now. And then my solution is, well, let me just work harder. Let me just send out more emails. Let me just, reach out to my team and like figure out what we're doing with marketing that we need to do differently to like get people that are ready to pay faster. So it does come up, especially when things are not going our way, right? Or my way rather. And And it's one of those things where the more evolved that I think we can get, especially me, like the more our resistance and our limiting beliefs get sneakier, you know. And I'm an immigrant too, so I came to America when I was 5. I didn't learn English till I was 11. So my parents instilled on me since I was 5, you have to work all the time. Like you have to learn English all the time. You have to do this, you have to do that. And my parents sacrificed a lot for me and my siblings to make sure that we were great. So they spent all of their money. They would cut deals with providers to make sure that we would be in karate, that we would be in swimming. You know, my parents were broke trying to make sure that we, the next generation, would do more and learn more. And I remember my dad wanted to be a pianist. He wanted to be a pianist, and he put me in piano. And piano is expensive, or I don't know what it is that, but back then it was expensive for us. And he literally spent all of his money on me and my siblings to like make sure that we had better. And he would not let us have free time. So I have the habit of always working. Even when I'm making great money and I've closed a deal, I'm thinking, okay, where's the next deal coming from? I'm always thinking like forward movement. And a big part of it is fear, because I grew up, you know, broke. You know, I grew up having a job since I was like 14, working at supermarkets, you know, going into debt for college, and being broke for me was traumatizing. You know, not having the ability to go out with my friends, having to work at a grocery store to be able to buy sneakers, you know, having to see my parents argue about money. So I have that mentality that if we don't have money, or if we're not making money every day, we're broke, which is not always the case. You know, as entrepreneurs, like it's not always the case where we're broke if we're not making money every day, right? So like changing the mentality of like where it's coming from to changing the mentality to like, I actually want to make money every day, because I think also the more money I have, the more good I can do in the world, versus trying to just make money because I feel like there's not enough. It's usually where my activity was rooted in, and now I'm working through that.
I think, yeah, I was broke many times as well, but haven't got necessarily traumatized with it. I think after sometimes just becomes like a way of living. Um, but it's also like the highs and lows. Like I have a very extreme personality, right? So I love taking risks, and I
Mhm.
feel really bored when I'm just cruising, you know? So yeah, and sometimes a capitalistic and materialistic way of just being grateful for things is buying stuff that you like and
Yeah,
walking in front of them on a daily basis, and it's like, yo, I've made it, you know. I've
yeah,
got this sitting in the driveway, got this house. I think this solidifies the notion to your subconscious that you made it. And yeah, because and I'm saying this because people nowadays, a lot of them have something against capitalism and buying fancy things. You know, I think it's great if it's gonna make you conscious.
yeah,
Obviously, there is traps, right? Like, don't get on the hedonic treadmill of constantly buying new shit and
yeah,
feeling dissatisfied when you buy stuff and it actually makes you unhappier.
yeah,
That one is pretty tricky, but also with the constant working mentality, I have that certainly, like workaholism. I don't think it's necessarily bad, especially if you love what you're doing. And I think it's just natural survival and thriving mechanism of when you achieve something, you immediately want the next thing, right? I was talking to a world record holder of a 100K marathon and 100-mile marathon this morning, and it's the same. Like once you have won that big fancy medal, it's up to the next one. I think it's natural in us humans to want to grow like 1% on a daily basis, and sitting on the laurel, that's how you get depressed, in my
yeah.
opinion. What do you think?
I think it's a few things. I think having goals, always having goals is crucial. Like at least for me, it's crucial. Like I find a lot of joy in accomplishing things and actually finding a lot of joy in producing results. The danger with that, excuse me, the danger with that is if we, or if I rather, if I have kept finding the joy when things are done, not necessarily when I'm doing the thing or on the journey, then I'm practicing only being fulfilled when I get a result. So going back to your earlier question of like what is something else that I'm working through, it's also like changing my perspective of finding the joy in the journey. So I'm actually working on a speech for entrepreneurs where a lot of entrepreneurs, especially like real estate agents or realtors, they only get paid when they sell something or they get a client that spends money. Um, but a lot of entrepreneurs, especially like if we're not making money, we feel like failures, especially like if we don't have a job or a paycheck coming in from somewhere else, we feel like a failure. Um, but if we don't practice happiness and gratitude on the journey, by the time that we get to the goal, that level of joy is going to be very short lived. So it's always great to have the next thing to work towards. And also while we're working through whatever the thing we're working through, we want to practice the joy and the happiness and the gratitude, because if we don't, we're going to get to the goal and we're going to be happy for like 2 days. We're going to get the car and you're like, it's a great car. And then a month later, you're like, it's cool. And then, or you buy the house and you're like, that's cool.
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting. I used to have been like very goal oriented, like you did before, and oddly enough, that wasn't working super well because I don't think the brain understand space time that well that much. So I operate on the different dimensions nowadays, and it's working better than when I used to have like these very precise goal, like make 100K this month, for example, and then reach I don't know like 70K and still be disappointed.
Yeah.
So I'm way more in the present moment. I won't tell you that like I'm the happiest as I've been. I used to be a digital nomad and take more time for myself, take the weekends off. Nowadays I work on the weekends. I'm pretty happy where I am right now. But yeah, in my case, it's just like being very much in the moment, being very risky in the decisions that I take. My wife, she's like very conservative. So I just hand her out the fruits of my labor and she manages it. And me, I keep on being in this like very extreme and risky state of things. That's where I operate well. That's where I have fun as well.
Yeah.
Right. I think it's important to have some money in the bank as well, just subconsciously, right? Like not because we will use that money, but just because hey, you're safe.
Yeah.
And most importantly, in my case, is like, hey, you're a provider. You did
Yeah.
your fucking job, so you can rest safe at night because I've been in situation in which I was the provider and I wasn't
Yeah.
providing to my maximum capacity, and that fucking sucked, and I felt lesser. And I
Hmm.
think that's fine, like my role as a human being, it's being a leader, it's being a provider, it's being a protector of my community, and when I don't do that, I feel like I'm not like aligned with my chakras or whatever you want to call them. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, we're talking about a lot of different things. There's identity that we're talking about. So the identity that we have as men, as providers, as leaders, as business owners, and then we're talking about what makes us feel safe. We're talking about what makes us feel secure. And I don't care who the person is, we need money to survive. And whoever says money doesn't buy you happiness has never been broke. Like they have clearly haven't
Or rich?
been broke or rich, right? And there's a study by Bankrate that they released last year, and they said that I believe in America, so you need to have made, or you need to make per year about $186,000 to be financially secure per year. Per year. Um, and when I saw that number, I thought, well, that's crazy because in America, only 18% of employees ever make six figures, you know? And then if you go per race, racial group, or ethnicity group, I think Latinos in America, I think make like less than 1% make six figures out of that entire number. Um, so a lot of what you're talking about is we're also seeing that we're living in a world where we need money. Like food costs money, we have to pay for water. We need a roof over our heads, and then growing up, especially like if we identify as man or female or whatever, we learn subconsciously like how to view money, what the roles are. Historically, like men are the providers. Obviously it's shifted now, and I think it should have shifted, It shouldn't be so rigid, but that's a big thing that men grow up learning subconsciously. Whether they accept it or not, it's like you are the provider, you're responsible, you should be doing this. And then within our identities, we attach so many different things. How much money do we have? What kind of jobs do we do? How do we dress? How do we look? What does our body feel like? And whenever our different components of ourselves aren't healthy or challenged, that's when we're seeing like, oh, I have an attachment to this, right? So when I was broke, I would feel like shit also because I couldn't do anything. I couldn't even go out. I couldn't even, pay my bills on time. And then I just felt like a failure. But a big part of it is because we grow up learning like, oh, you have to pay for things, And it's not right or wrong. I think the issue becomes is if we're not aware how attached we are to certain things, right? So to your point, it's also we have to do the work of saying, well, what am I attached to? In 2021, I got really sick with COVID, and then I developed like long haul COVID symptoms. And the way that it showed up for me was psoriasis all over my body. And then as an entertainer, where I have to go auditions, and they want to see my arms and want to see how I look like, I couldn't. So I had to start working through my identity of my physique and how I looked because I didn't look the way that I was used to. I didn't look good. And I saw, I'm like, oh, I have an attachment to my looks, just like we have an attachment to our money, whether people are in awareness of it or not. So a lot of what you're talking about is also our identity and also how attached we are to those things.
Right. Yeah. And I used to be like, oh, actors, like they're a bit unethical and or they're mentally unstable. But I discovered as of late that like us humans, we shift identities, right? And I think that's the best way to go with it. In some situation, we are the athlete. In my case, in most situations, I'm the founder. In some situation, I'm the husband, the dad. So I think we need to shift throughout these identities and be fluid to have a good life. Because else, if you make less money, right? Your founder identity will take a shot. Well, sure, I'm going to go have a 1 hour run and become the athlete and sort of come back fresher and psychologically more sane, right? So thanks for being on, Pepz. Where can people find out more about you?
Well, firstly, thank you for having me. I enjoyed this conversation. The best place would be my website. So my website is peptalkwithpeps.com, or people can find me on LinkedIn. And I would say those are the top two places, LinkedIn and my website, which is peptalkwithpeps.com.
So that was Pepz and Charles for another Founder with